What's up, guys? We are coming at you live from South Beach. Another nice morning of runs on the beach, and I'll point out that we're all wearing shoes.
Mm-hmm.
A big step up. Steve, you looked great yesterday.
Thank you.
You looked fantastic. We did not bring the
I thought we
professionalism.
matched South Beach perfectly, and then him over there with his job interview apparently required us to up the dress code.
I'm trying to elevate everyone's game here. That's what a good quarterback
Your
does.
claim that on Radio Row everyone dresses that way was unbelievable. Anyways, I digress.
The people doing TV did. So, anyway.
We're going to talk 49ers offense, Chiefs defense. So when the Niners have the ball, these are some of the things that are going to be very important to whether they're successful, and what will the Chiefs do? What can they do to kind of counterbalance some of those things? So let's start with this. A lot of people will start with the running game for the Niners. Well, let's start with the passing game. Jimmy G threw the ball, 1.5 times in the last game, if you keep kind of listening to all the things that people are saying. Where does Jimmy G rank? Is he a top 10 guy, top 15 guy? What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, this year, just by grading, he's a top 15 guy, and I do think he's in that middle tier of quarterbacks, a phrase I used a lot. In that middle tier of quarterbacks, they can have really good, productive seasons, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. Shanahan's scheme has done a great job of elevating quarterbacks. So Garoppolo, number 12 as far as passing grade goes, so he's right there. I think there's so much recency bias, because he only threw the ball 8 times that people think, oh, he was just a passenger on this ride. He had to go out and win a ton of games this year.
I mean, the composition of the quarterback play of the league was such that he ended up being in that sort of range. When Breeze misses 5 games, Roethlisberger misses most of the season. Andrew Luck retires and players play poorly at the position. We really saw in the NFL this year that coaching can elevate players or regress players. And we saw that with Shanahan and Garoppolo. I think if you put Garoppolo on a league average team with league average coach, you're probably getting bottom half of that 10 to 20 range. But with Shanahan, you can get in that top half.
And I think the thing with most of the quarterbacks in that mid-range is that they can be pretty much anywhere on any given day, right? We're talking about a one-game performance. I think Jimmy G's had bad games. There are games he could be pretty poor, and he's had excellent games as well. He's been vital parts of a significant passing offense, not just a passenger in the run game. So consistency is the big thing, right? Jimmy G is somewhere broadly in that top 15, borderline top 10 range, but on Sunday, it could be anywhere.
It could go anywhere from top 5 to bottom 5.
Right.
The thing that dragged him down real quick, like one throw here and there, one sack, fumble here and there throughout the season. If he avoids that on Sunday, they can put points.
It is really strange with guys like that who they're not generating a ton of negatively graded plays, right? But the ones that they do are catastrophic. He had more turnover-worthy plays than big-time throws, but his negatively graded play rate wasn't egregious. It was still in the top half of the league. His ADOT wasn't particularly high, so that kind of curbs that a little bit. But you're right; it is just one time he doesn't see a linebacker, or one time he fumbles in the backfield after a sack, and so he just has to limit those this week.
He's been really good playing in the limited sample when they've been losing. And I go back to the New Orleans game because that game to me is the one that I think more often than not plays the most like this game against Kansas City. They got out to a 20-7 deficit and then came storming back, scored 21 points with only 20 rushing yards. And he was fantastic in that game, really played well against a defense that's nothing to write home about, kind of like the Chiefs. And so I'm curious, if they get down in this game, if the Chiefs come out hot, is Jimmy G a guy who's our 8th highest graded guy since Sanders came over? He has that potential. Is he a guy that you have faith can actually bring the Niners back to the passing game?
I mean, it's not necessarily the way the Niners want to play, but I think he's shown that he can do it. And I don't know how much this is worth on Sunday, but the fact that the 49ers have won all these different style games, they've won averaging 9 yards per carry, they've won with Jimmy G making comebacks, they've won with great defensive performances. I don't know how much that weighs in on Sunday, but they've shown that they could do it, and if they do have to, they have enough weapons with Emmanuel Sanders, with Deebo Samuel, with George Kittle. They have enough weapons to spread the ball and move the ball.
Well, it sort of speaks to the point of why probably the best team in the NFL is not in this game, which is Baltimore, because we just didn't have data on them when they got behind, right? So like the whole season, we saw them play 1 or 2 types of games. And while, chasing after the New Orleans game and, might be a little bit of a small sample, we've at least seen that it's possible. As you said, if you're the Niners, you don't want to get behind the Chiefs because unlike the Saints in that game, the Chiefs are probably not going to relent at all and let you get back and have a lead by halftime. But yeah, I mean, Garoppolo can go toe-to-toe with teams that have good but not great defenses like New Orleans or Kansas City.
I will say one thing that does scare me a bit, this Niners offense, we'll talk about it as a whole in a second, very much yak-centric. lowest average depth of throw, but the most yards after the catch per reception. And you brought up this point yesterday. The Chiefs' defense, they just tackle way better this year. And so I think that's a place where they can limit, and in particular, George Kittle is the guy where a lot of that yards after the catch comes from. So I'm curious, what are the Chiefs going to do against Kittle? Is it something that they think they can slow him down, they can stop him? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Garoppolo is that, when you talk about having to cross the street 10 times to get to the end zone, then it becomes more probable that he makes one of those mistakes on the way there. Whereas the big plays, you obviously don't, you limit your risk there. But yeah, I think with the Chiefs, I mean, I think that they just keep Kittle in front of them with Tyrann Mathieu. And he's been really good. They've made the games play in front of him all season, and he's come up and made tackles. He's done a good job in the slot. He's done a good job when he's played deep. I don't think he's played a tight end like this all season, but I'm sure that that's the person they'll lean on because he's their best player on defense.
Yeah, I think Matthew is the big key to that because the Chiefs linebackers kind of suck, and Kittle's amazing, right? And the 49ers, more than any other team, want to target the middle of the field. And they're really good at moving guys out of that space as well, like by motion, all that kind of stuff. So they're going to put those Chiefs linebackers in a real bind unless the Chiefs say, well, to combat what you want to do over the middle, we're going to use Tyrann Mathieu as our kind of chess piece on defense and match up with you that way.
Well, and that's really helped them. I mean, we saw it starting in the Denver game on that Thursday night that Mahomes got injured. They have sort of scrapped this idea that their linebackers are going to be coverage players, like a normal defense, right? They basically said, and Chris Jones' injury and ineffectiveness against the run has sort of helped this as well, but they basically they have 4 defensive tackles who are all big run stuffers. They put those guys there. They trust Frank Clark to get to the quarterback, and then they blitz the linebackers because they're like, you might as well get after the quarterback because you can't cover, right? And so that's probably going to be what they do in terms of trying to have run blitzes and then obviously blitzing Garoppolo and leaving that Kittle matchup to Mathieu.
Mathieu, sorry, I was just going to give some data points here. So limited sample. Mathieu covering tight ends when targeting against tight ends. 10 for 19, 4 yards per target, a 25 passer rating for the quarterbacks throwing the ball. Now, he has not faced George Kittle, to your credit. George Kittle, a guy that leads all tight ends in yards after the catch, when he's been matched up on a cornerback, 135 passer rating, 9 yards per target. So something's got to give there. I do think, I'm curious on your take on this, because Kittle is such a yards after the catch guy, he's not a downfield guy like Gronk. Does that give Mathieu a little bit more of an advantage because his speed can close down on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. A lot of that yak is coming against, zone. You get those deep crossers and all that stuff. So it's not. I mean, other than that, beast mode type of play that he made against New Orleans, where it's man coverage, he went out route and then takes off for 40 more yards. A lot of that is schemed up yak is too, plus Kittle being awesome. So I don't know if that
most broken tackles by a tight end here. Don't come at my guy.
Oh, sorry. Kittle's incredible.
Don't come at George like that.
I think the biggest question is because everybody's talking about the run game, and I always point back to Kansas City really trying to stop the run against Minnesota and their outside zone scheme, and really trying to stop the run against Derrick Henry, and really committing to that. Do they truly commit to that? Do they really believe, that they need to stop San Francisco's running game, because that will open up, more passing lanes if that's their strategy? Or do they slow play it the way we would, which we'd say play pass first and then play run second and try to hold them to 4, per carry and eliminate those big plays. I think that cat and mouse game is going to be.
Well, and I think that's where the Niners having a bunch of good but not elite wide receivers helps Kansas City a little bit, because Kansas City in their secondary, other than Mathieu, who matched up on Kittle, has a bunch of good but not elite corners, right? Like Rashad Fenton's a 6th-round pick from South Carolina. He's done well, but you match him up against an elite slot receiver, he's going to be toast all day. Charvarius Ward's been fine. Rashad Breeland's a little bit weaker, but the Niners, I mean, you're talking going down to Kendrick Bourne, Emmanuel Sanders,
I'm sorry. You went to Kendrick Bourne first? Well, Deebo Samuel, Emmanuel Sanders. I would argue that those guys are top-level wide receivers. And if I'm the Chiefs, I would be a little worried about putting my best coverage guy on George Kittle and leaving the slot potentially really in danger. Because those guys and Kyle Shanahan, he will leverage those guys in the best way possible. We haven't seen what Emmanuel Sanders can do in this postseason because they haven't had to.
Yeah, but the issue with Chiefs, the reason I went down to Bourne is he's their 3rd wide receiver, right? So Sanders and Samuel, you get to them, and I think the Chiefs have enough as a collective in the secondary to maybe slow down 2 receivers. If the Niners had the 3rd wide receiver that was somebody who they could rely on more, I would be a little bit more afraid, given that Bashaud Breeland, by our WAR metric, was a below replacement level player. He's a starting corner in the league who's below, I think, what a practice squad player.
If you look at what Spags has done, though, too, it's a lot more zone-heavy scheme this year. I could not believe when I looked at the stat that they've given up the lowest percentage of open throws beyond the sticks. So you're just looking at all targets. Their percentage is number 1, and the Niners are number 3. So the Chiefs have done a really good job of just not giving up too many easy, first downs compared to what they were last year. So I think there's a lot of, sit back, keep things in front of you, and then Spags will dial up that zero blitz and come after them, periodically.
Spags.
Got a good vibe.
First name is, what is that? It's not a first name
Nickname
basis, but it's like a last name. Yeah. Very impressive.
He's the defensive coordinator.
No, I know who he is. I'm intrigued that you're on such good terms with him.
Yeah.
When you dress this professionally,
It's true, yeah.
to Radio Row,
You're
you fit right in.
We're going to be hanging out in a little bit.
Okay.
Go see Spags.
Let's talk a little bit about the Niners offense in general, though, like what Kyle Shanahan has done. There are 2 things that really stick out to me. The first is his offense has led the league in motion, percentage of plays using motion since 2016, since that Falcons year where they went to the Super Bowl. 78% of their plays utilize motion this year. And yet, despite all that, they're 3rd in the league, I believe, in yards per play using motion. So very effective. The second thing is they use 2 backs with Kyle Juszczyk quite often, right? More than any other team in the league. And to me, those 2 things create a lot of mismatches, and Kyle Shanahan has just been taking advantage of them left and right.
Right. I think that one of the big things is, I keep talking about this all week, that Kyle Shanahan's offense has kind of taken what was already a really effective system and just evolved it on and on and on. And the motion is a great example, right? People used to use motion as essentially just a simple read on the defense. Are you playing man or zone? I'm going to take your guy here, move him to the other side. If you follow him, you're playing man. If you don't, it's probably zone. That's all I'm looking for here. His motion is completely different, right? They use all this jet motion. They motion at speed, and it's all designed not just to get a read on what the defense is doing, but to manipulate specific defenders in that defense to create space over the middle, which is where they want to target. It's like, look, the middle's a crowded place, and it's tougher to get yardage that way because you're going to put the ball in harm's way. So if I can shift a linebacker over here because he's got to follow jet motion, now there's a big space that I can hit George Kittle over the middle, or Kyle Juszczyk, or Deebo Samuel, any of those guys. And his just the evolution from take a guy here, slowly move him to the other side of the field, and watch what happens, versus what they're doing with motion. And you add in the fact that they do it more than anybody else. It's crazy to watch.
It's like
And
jet
their
motion
players-
plus end around. I mean, they're
all their
stacking
players are
motions.
fast, right? Like their running backs are all like they don't have the pedigree of many of them, but they're just fast, and obviously Samuel is as well. It's really interesting how instead of negotiating box players in the run game by personnel and separate, they negotiate space, right? So like it doesn't really like they kind of screw with our numbers a little bit because they put there may be 8 Packers in the box, but all of them have their back turned the wrong way or they're moving in the wrong direction, and so like the opposing defense might think they have the run covered, but they really don't. They've given them alleys to run through that are sort of unconventional.
The scheme started out with we're going to run a ton of outside zone back in the 90s with Shanahan, and it's going to leave one unblocked defender, and he's going to be in conflict. And you either overcommit to the run and we run play action off of it, or you play the boot and we manipulate box count. But now they're doing it with the motion. They're doing it with all these other ways, and it's not just that one unblocked defender. It's also the linebacker that needs to play off of that guy. So now they're manipulating 2 defenders. It's not the entire defense that needs to react to motion. It's 2 guys, really, and that's just enough to create that passing lane, to create those easy yards, to create yak, and it all really works well together.
And the speed of the motion is a really important point because you can't just, as a defense, you can't just like take a beat. Let's make sure it's real. You can't do that because the guy's 5 yards beyond you at that point. You have to honor it, move with it, at which point you've opened up the space they're trying to create.
Does that, this gets brought up a lot, right? Does the fact that they're so scheme reliant hurt them in situations where, okay, now they've stopped 1A. What do we come at with 1B, right? What's our second card? That oftentimes I feel like with the Chiefs, right, that's Patrick Mahomes creating outside of structure. Do we think that the Chiefs have an answer for 1A, or is it going to be just kind of a track meet?
If you're rooting for the Chiefs in this game, you have to hope for the fact that 2 weeks off is going to help you. You have to hope for the fact that, for me, in offensive football goes quarterback scheme, right? So like the Niners are certainly in that second category where the scheme enhances the QB. So if you take away some of this thing scheme wants to do, you don't have, as you said, Mahomes to just break everything up. So it'll be interesting because I do think that like Shanahan gets a pretty it was clear the bye helped him. It was clear that teams that only get like a week off against him struggle. But like Spagnuolo's done a pretty good job this year and 2 weeks off. I'm bullish on what the 2 weeks off can do. That being said, like Shanahan has 2 weeks to prepare and create new things. So
I think the thing with Shanahan too, I wrote this up on the site this week. He's called plays for 12 years, and 9 out of those years, his passing offense has essentially exceeded expectations based off quarterback play. So he is creating offense consistently year over year. And within that 12-year sample, there are games where the game flow wasn't great, right? They didn't have the run game. They didn't have the play action game. They're very reliant on play action, which again doesn't necessarily mean you don't have to run the ball to set up play action, but you can come out of your comfort zone if you're down 14. Are you still going to run the same scheme? Are you still going to
get in your own head, so to speak?
Well,
and that was Baltimore too. Like if Baltimore still stuck to their same scheme, they could have played from behind, but they got into more of a drop back passing game. So I think that's going to be the biggest key. Like if they can stick to their game plan, and Kansas City might be best off flipping. I mean, not that you can just, hey, let's get up to a 14-0 lead, but if they're able to flip the script from what they've been facing and they get up 14-0, that could really put the Niners.
Right, it's scary. We all assume that because what's happened in the playoffs the first 2 times, that Kansas City's automatically going to get behind in this game.
Yeah, we're just going to see a 17-0 lead.
Yeah, and then we're all asking that from the Niners' perspective, like, what are they going to do? But there's as good, or maybe even a better chance that they get behind, and then we're going to see Jimmy G versus Pat Mahomes.
I have a crazy take, and this is just comparing the Super Bowl in 2016 to the playoffs this year. The Niners have become a super run-heavy team when they've had the lead. In that 16 Super Bowl, they threw the ball with the lead 64% of the time and were great, 9 yards per play. They lost the game because of mistakes, not because they weren't successful passing the ball when they did pass the ball. In the 19 playoffs, though, they have run the ball 84% of the time with the lead. Wow. Against Patrick Mahomes, you just can't do that. I don't care how successful your run game is. And so I'm very curious, if the Niners do get up with a lead, do they press their advantage? Do they try and sit on the lead? Do they allow Patrick Mahomes to creep back in? This is a one-possession game. I don't care if Jimmy G is playing at a top 8 level.
It's really hard to
be better
back in the tube.
You have to maximize points.
Once you've gone into the prevent offense, it's really hard to go back.
I thought Tennessee got up 17-7, and they went run screen, and it just felt like it's like you can't get into that run the clock out offense until the last 4 minutes of the game. Like literally, you can't do it until you have to maximize points until then when you're playing Kansas City versus any other team.
Should be exciting. One X factor to watch for, I think, are the 4th downs. Shanahan has been willing to go for 4th and short as an underdog in New Orleans, in Baltimore. It'll be interesting to see what happens. If they're behind, do they get more aggressive? Yep. If they're in the lead, do they salt it away and kick field goals? I think just one thing to watch for in addition to the scheme. Should be pretty exciting. We'll be back tonight. We've got a special guest.
We do.
Not gonna give this one away either. We had PFT on. Commenter on yesterday and a good guest on today, and then of course we'll be back tomorrow morning looking at the other side of the ball with the Chiefs offense. Thanks, guys. Great eggs.